Hello, this is Terry Lee. The topic that I chose is the Prader-Willi syndrome. So, what is Prader-Willi syndrome? I found an interesting journal article by Cassidy and Driscoll. But Prader-Willi syndrome, in the words of them, is a highly variable genetic disorder that affects multiple body systems, and it mostly consistent of major manifestations. And in other words, the Prader-Willi syndrome is a disorder that can cause obesity, short height, and intellectual disabilities. It's usually caused by the deletion of chromosome 15 and passed down by the father. So over here, I actually have a picture of the chromosome 15 in Prader-Willi syndrome. Kind of shows how the copy of the father's genes not functioning and then a copy of the mother's, and how that silences some genes involved in the Prader-Willi syndrome. Then over here is a copy from the father and a copy from the mother's genes, and it shows how it wakes up some genes involved. So how often does it occur? The Prader-Willi syndrome, or PWS for short, is very rare, and it typically, there's typically fewer than 20,000 cases a year. And what are the effects? There was a study done, and it shows, it examined 40 patients with PWS, and the average height of the patients were 4'10", and they had an average weight of 251 pounds. So obviously, just off of those two numbers, you can tell that that's pretty obese. Here's the bigger picture of that. To put that in perspective, the average height for someone in that height range is 91 to 118 pounds, with 119 to 142 being considered overweight. And what I had just told you about, at that weight, 231 pounds is quite a significant boost. So how is it found? There's a test called the DNA methylation that can detect most cases. According to Medical News Today, some people with PWS do not receive a diagnosis, or they are given a misdiagnosis of Down syndrome or autism spectrum disorder, ASD, as some features of these conditions overlap with those. So some of those developmental delays and things like that, sometimes children that actually do have PWS may get that label because those disorders, delays, they kind of overlap. So what are some symptoms? Simply put, some symptoms may include delays in development, food cravings, gain in body weight, delay in motor and verbal skills, sleep disorders, and a delay in puberty. So kind of just what I was referencing to on the last slide, those delays in development is probably what can cause the diagnosis of autism or getting the label of developmental delay, which would put one under the special education pathway. So how long do people with Prader-Willi syndrome typically live? From what I was able to find in research online, their typical lifespan on average is around 40 years. However, the lifespan has increased in recent years. So according to NCBI, special medical surveillance of people with PWS from 40 years onwards would ensure that intervention and support is offered with respect to specific areas of decline at the earliest possible time. So if you do reach the age of 40, then you're going to get more medical surveillance. And to conclude, I have a video that sums it all up, but I didn't want to kind of talk about what are some ways in preventing this from happening? Essentially, from what I researched, is that there's not really a way of preventing, you know, aside from regular dieting and things like that. It's kind of one of those things where you just have to continuously monitor the weight. It's kind of essentially the same way that you would monitor your own weight, but it's a little bit harder because you literally do have these cravings and different things like that. So it's just one of those things that's really difficult.
Hi, I'm Susan Hedstrom. My son Jaden was born with Prader-Willi syndrome, also known as PWS. In this video, I'm going to explain briefly what PWS is, including how it occurs, some of the challenges of PWS, and promising research into treatments. Prader-Willi syndrome is a rare disorder that occurs in about 1 in 15,000 births. It affects males and females as well as all ethnicities with equal frequency. PWS is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's caused by the loss of active paternally inherited genetic material on chromosome 15. Infants with PWS may be identified shortly after birth on the basis of a weak cry, hypotonia or low muscle tone, undescended testes in males, and difficulty feeding. Suspected PWS can be confirmed by a DNA test, which detects PWS with greater than 99% accuracy. Babies with PWS typically require an NG or G tube, special bottles, and extended feeding times. Careful monitoring of babies with PWS is necessary since some may experience failure to thrive. It's recommended to begin growth hormone as soon as possible. PWS is a spectrum disorder. Not every person with PWS will face every challenge that PWS can present. That said, here are some of the challenges that people with PWS may face. Hyperphagia is excessive hunger. Sometime after age 2, a child with PWS will start to gain weight very easily and may have a heightened focus on food. Increased appetite usually starts during childhood and can be gradual. Research is currently underway to find treatments for PWS. But for now, controlling the child's access to food is the only intervention available to manage hyperphagia. It can be overwhelming to see the list of challenges PWS may present, but as a parent of a child with PWS, I can tell you, we have hope. Children with PWS can and do grow up to do amazing things. If your child has PWS, there are resources and a community to help you. You can start by downloading First Steps, a parent's guide to Prader-Willi syndrome. Thanks to the research funded through FPWR of the past 10 years, we now have more clinical trials for PWS coming down the pipeline than ever before.
So that was a video that kind of just summed up PWS and kind of what I just explained. And here is my resources that I use to gather my information. And thank you for your time.